I'd like to call us back into session, the BVSD work session for January 17th. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Anderson to do the introduction for the next part of our meeting.
Thank you, Board President Gephardt, members of the board. Tonight we have with us our officers from our District Accountability Committee. I see Chris Haynes is on, and Jorge, are you with us as well?
Yes, I'm here. I can now hear you, I think. Can you speak again?
Yep, Jorge, are you here with us?
Yes, I'm here.
There he is, live and in person. Okay, or virtually. And so, board members, we have a meeting with District Accountability Committee leadership at the beginning of each semester, where the board can have a conversation with DAC leadership around opportunities for them to work together with us as we're thinking about our priorities for the upcoming semester. We have not gone through our board prioritization yet. So this is an opportunity for us to hear from DAC and some of the things that they would hope to work on, and the board to give DAC any direction that they would like to give them in regards to things they're interested for DAC to investigate. So I'll stop talking and I'll turn it back over to you, Kathy.
Welcome, Jorge. I think we'll just turn it over to the two of you and take it from there.
All right. Thank you, Kathy. Hope you can hear me okay. I appreciate you inviting us to this meeting to kind of check on how things are going. We've had a very busy and productive year, I think, so far. The big part of the first part of the year was focused on reviewing the UIP recommendation and making UIP recommendations. And I want to say that we really appreciate how responsive the district administration and the board were to feedback from DAC and to other constituencies in the community regarding the need to look more explicitly at kind of root causes in the form of institutional racism and bias that's endemic to our system. I think that was a really big step towards addressing kind of long-standing disparities that we're still seeing today. So we really appreciate that responsiveness. We're currently reviewing the budget, drafting budget recommendations. It's nice to see that the district has been moving forward with the long-term planning committee, and that is starting to take shape. We're focusing a little bit more on kind of what type of steps we take in the short term to think about the post-pandemic landscape in the context of declining enrollments and in addressing these disparities moving forward. So those will be coming to you, I believe, next week. We heard back about the bond, which is a big success, the Grad Plus program, and some changes that are coming in regarding more support for MTSS and differentiated funding for schools. So that's been very positive. Moving towards the second half of the year, we've got a couple of things that are we've set up as priorities. The first is kind of continue this work that we began with the UIP in terms of looking at the implementation, in particular looking to things like the disproportionate discipline data that have been drafted. I know that that's supposed to be something that's kind of evolving and should be receptive to change. So we've been kind of reaching out to Jonathan Dings to kind of find ways to do a couple of things. One is make the data more useful so that we can distinguish between behaviors and incidents that are arising from the types of disciplinary responses or measures that are being taken. So we kind of better tease out the two ends of the equation. And the other part is to increase the utility of the data that's being made publicly available or available to principals in schools, as well as the forward-facing dashboard data that in its current form is very much a work in progress. So that's been something that we're thinking about focusing on for the spring. The other part that we're thinking about for the spring is really continuing to work on the policy changes moving forward. I know we're working on policy KB now and thinking about how we will or drafting better language to help guide the partnerships with the families, parents, and community organizations. And I think Christopher can speak to that a little bit. And I think those are the two kind of big things that we have on the agenda moving forward towards the spring. And anything else that you might want to throw our way. But Chris, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Sure, thanks, Jorge. I'll add just a couple of points before we turn it back over for discussion. And just on the policy prioritization front, just as Jorge said, one of the big priorities for us in the second half of this year is continuing to drive forward the work that we've been doing on the recommendation for a possible adoption or revision of policy KB. Some of the folks on the board will know this has been sort of a long process that was actually started in earnest by the DAC policy subcommittee last year, where some drafting was done. And then we initiated a round of stakeholder feedback and review in consultation with District Council Kathleen Sullivan. So across the fall, Kathleen was able to solicit some really great feedback and did some redlining with district staff on the original draft that DAC policy subcommittee had put together the previous spring. So now that we're through that particular round of stakeholder feedback and review, we're proceeding to engage with Jamila and others on DAC and the Family Engagement Subcommittee group, as well as CAPL leadership to get their eyes on the current red line, and hoping through those various rounds of stakeholder review to end up with a proposed policy that meets a lot of needs, is well-rounded, and has benefited from a diversity of viewpoints and pens and pencils, to put it succinctly. So we're excited to drive that forward. We're hoping to bring that before you all to take a look at and consider with a memo of recommendations this spring. So we'll be working with the DAC policy subcommittee chairs, Terry and Sandy, and myself will be working with Kathleen and Laura to try to get that on the calendar. So we're excited about KB. The other two things that I'll bring up on the policy front are our DAC policy subcommittee is currently working on doing some literature review in preparation for a directional memo on a possible revision to policy JECC on open enrollment and assignment of schools, which we know has been on the board's list of priorities, and we've been working closely with Kathleen on that. So we are hoping to get something in front of the board this spring in the form of a memo related to JECC. And we also, I know we talked about this back in our September work session, but we are hoping to pick back up the thread on the revision and memo and presentation that was done to the board on policy AE and AER, which really occurred right in the thick of our the upswing of the pandemic and was never ultimately adopted. So we'd like to re-bring that to your attention and reopen a discussion about AE and AER, which has to do with the constitution of DAC and SAC and the mission and purpose of those groups. So those three policies, KB, JECC, and AE/AER, have been on our docket for a little while now, and we're looking forward to driving those forward this spring and making some progress and engaging with you all on the board. So I'll pause there. That's just what I wanted to add to round out the policy conversation. Thanks, Jorge.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. And I do want to add a couple things that I forgot to mention. As part of that discussion regarding the discipline data, there's a general interest in kind of learning more about the implementation of the school safety counselor program, our move towards restorative justice practices, and the increased investment in mental health.
Jorge?
Yes.
You're cutting in and out, so we're not getting everything you're saying.
Okay, let me try that one more time and a little more slowly then. So in addition to the work looking at the data, we've also been, this interest among the DAC in terms of looking at the implementation of the school safety counselor program, and looking at the ways in which we're moving towards building more restorative justice practices and responses, and our increased investment in mental health resources across the school district as a part of that discussion. And I believe, and then that was all that I wanted to add. Did that come through okay?
So if I can paraphrase, you're looking at bolstering our restorative justice practices in some of the schools and the data for the safety advocates. Rob's going to interpret.
Yeah, I think I was able to capture what Jorge was saying, that there's interest in reviewing the school safety advocate position and how we're utilizing and leveraging those positions to increase restorative practices at scale across the district, right? And so between that and also reviewing our disproportionate discipline data and looking at how we can make the data more actionable for SACs in schools. Do I have that right, Jorge?
Maybe you can elaborate on what Jorge was saying about family partnerships and that work that they wanted to look at as well?
I think that's around policy KB.
But-
And working with their family engagement subcommittee that they have at DAC to begin to look at recommendations around improvements to policy KB.
Thank you, Rob. That's correct. It's around the policy KB work that we would be doing in our family engagement subcommittee.
So should we take questions now? Jorge, I just saw you take your earbuds out, but I'm hoping you can still hear us. Or
I think
not.
he's probably trying to hear you better.
That's
We'll see if it works.
So we'll wait and see if Jorge comes back, and then we can ask questions. So we have some questions for you, Chris, while we wait for Jorge, if that's all right. Beth has a
Please.
question or two.
Hey, Chris, having never
Please.
been on the DAC, I'm curious about how you determine which policies you want to prioritize this year.
That's a great question, Beth. Thank you for that. So essentially, there's a couple different vectors to this. One is we collaborate with district council, periodically through the year, but especially at the start of each DAC year, to understand the current state of the conversations between district leadership, district council, and you all on the board for any policies that have come up as being ready for review or in need of review or in need of revision. And that's one of the inputs. One of the other vectors of how we determine that is kind of ground up feedback that members of the DAC, and specifically often members of the DAC policy subcommittee, have been hearing about or observing on their own or in their parent communities in their schools, things that may need, may be in need of fresh eyes or updates or other kinds of revisions. That's another vector. And one of the others is the ongoing efforts that the district is undertaking to try to make sure that all policies get reviewed or at least re-looked at on a 5-year cycle, so that policies don't become significantly outdated or kind of become vestigial by not having been paid attention to in years, sometimes decades. So there's a few different avenues where policy priority can come up, and then as we take in those inputs and those different vectors, we think about what aligns with the current values and the current thinking and overall priorities that DAC is undertaking at any given time, what aligns with what we think we can give sound and useful and actionable feedback on as a consultative body in DAC, and then that kind of flows into the work that we try to do each year. I hope that helps, Beth.
We have Jorge back.
Yes, I'm back, and I believe I can hear you.
The conversation that we just had with Chris and Beth about how policies are decided to be looked at by DAC. You heard that?
Yes, I did.
Great, okay, just wanted to make sure we're all caught up. Okay, Nicole has a question now.
Thanks, Kathy. I have a couple questions, but starting with the policy. So our review practice is study then action. And I'm thinking about the time we have left this semester and how this board will be changing inevitably come next November. And I am curious, thinking about how we work through policies and the timelines we have. Do you feel comfortable that you'll have those review pieces to us in advance of us potentially getting that work done this year? Or what is a firm timeline we can expect from you on those 3 policies you had mentioned?
Because you were looking there, okay.
Kathleen or Chris? I was looking at Kathleen, and because Chris wasn't on the screen, but.
Thank you for that question. Yes, I do feel confident that we are going to be able to move these priorities through the way we've committed to. It always takes longer than we want to, but honestly, I look at these policy accomplishments as being on a 2-year timeline. We're in year 2 right now, and I've committed to DAC that we're going to get those done and in front of the board. And I've also spoken with Dr. Anderson about how we can accelerate the review of some of those others with the really old timelines. So I hope you're ready, board members. There'll be a lot of good reading to do. And I also did just make a note that when we're working on a draft, and DAC already has it, as do some of our other community groups for feedback, that's probably a good time for me to share that red line with the board. So I'll make sure that I do that with the red lines that we're already working on.
That'd be much appreciated. Thank you, Kathleen. And then my other question was, in the very beginning, Jorge, you had mentioned kind of looking at the outward-facing data dashboards and some improvements there. And then later you spoke specifically about some of the behavioral data. So is it just the behavior data and the outward-facing dashboards on those pieces, or is it the other components of the data the district is collecting as far as our metrics that you're considering providing feedback on improvements for?
Thanks, Nicole. That's a great question. Regarding the dashboards, it's providing more general feedback across all the different metrics to make the data more useful. And so it's really a lot of more things like providing definitions, making sure the numbers make sense, thinking about scale, facilitating data dictionaries and tools for the SACs and the DACs, and doing those sorts of things across the board for the different types of data and how it's presented in those sorts of things. In addition to the more explicit work with the discipline data to get more fine-grained distinctions between behaviors and responses at the district, across school districts or across schools.
Thank you for clarifying that, and I agree. I love the fact that we have these dashboards and are publicly and transparently sharing this data, and there's work to improve on that in the coming years.
Right, it's a great start, and I think we can keep making it better.
This will be, I think, valuable conversations for me as we work with our team around, to what level of granularity is necessary, right, for school level, school personnel versus district accountability committee versus SACs versus the general public. Certainly we're always looking to improve. So I look forward to engaging in those conversations. Again, our strategic plan metrics dashboards are for the general public, right? And maybe it's a different cut that SACs are going to need as they work with their principals and work within their school communities to tackle challenging issues.
I'll just add, it sounds like the DAC has a lot on their plate for the rest of this calendar year, and I cannot imagine putting another piece on your plate. So thank you for all you're doing, and I look forward to hearing what you have to present to us later on this year.
Kitty, questions? Any more, Beth? I'm good. Thank you. Lisa? Richard? All right, well, leave it to you, Rob, to bring it home.
Jorge, Chris, appreciate both of your leadership. Really appreciate this conversation. Speaking for our governance team, we value your input, value your partnership. You all have helped us as we're striving to reach all of our goals, and so appreciate the partnership. And board members, again, as we go throughout the course of this semester, if there are opportunities for things to shift or for us to engage in DAC. As a reminder, Kitty's our board liaison to the District Accountability Committee. She can bring those directly on behalf of the board, and I am at every DAC meeting, and I can also share as well.
Hey, and Chris, at the next DAC meeting, and we're putting the dates out now, we're doing the candidate, I don't know what we'd call them, potential candidates to come talk to the board, so we're trying to get those dates out, so if you could help us spread those out to the SAC committee members, that would be great, and I'll send you those dates. We just are settling on them tonight, so, but we want to get the word out. We're doing 3 in February and 2 in March, potentially 2 in March, and trying to spread it out over like midday, weekend, evening times. So we're hoping we can get, we have 4 seats that are up, and so we're hoping we can get some interest in those seats. So anyway, just wanted to give you guys that heads up so you would know when those emails started coming, what we're doing. So thanks.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Good of the order tonight. So board members, I will see you all on Monday for our prioritization meeting. And then Tuesday, we have the tech open house, which is always really fun. And then a board meeting. I think that covers us for the next week, unless Laura or Rob, if I've forgotten anything. And then we have potential dates for the prioritization number 2, which Laura has sent out from Heather's calendar. So we can get back to Laura on that. Laura, is there anything else we're trying to schedule?
Nothing other than lunch with our legislators,
Right.
but we'll address that later.
Okay.
I will be sending out a doodle poll for the 2 dates proposed for the advocacy meeting.
Okay, great. Okay. I think that's everything. Safe travels, everyone. Do we want a snow day or do we not want a snow day? All right, thanks.
Thank you, everyone.